I also want to be clear that this levy, even with the 5.4 mil piece to it, does not add staff or does not add additional programming. It's actually smaller than what we really would like or need to keep things running exactly as they are. We're not doing that. We're going to have to make $750,000 in reductions this year, which means at the end of the school year, not prior to that, to get as lean as we possibly can. The other reason is to keep the millage down to a doable level. If you remember when we first started talking about this, you're talking about double digits if you're trying to keep everything status quo. We just don't have that wherewithal right at this point in time. So the levy is a little smaller than it could have been, but and we'll talk about that. So if you want to go to the first slide then, repeating the phase one is for $750,000. Okay, and this is an obligation that we have to be responsible to our taxpayers and be good stewards. We have to reduce, and the goal of this obviously is to reduce the cost with as small an impact on student learning as possible. Phase two is going to be tied to levy passage or failure, because if it fails, we're going to have to reduce another $1.6 million, which would be implemented at the end of the school year, but prior to the start of the next school year. We have to do that because tax years and school years don't coincide. And so we're obligated to put those into effect prior to the next school year. It will impact the classroom. Let's not beat around the bush. It will. Okay? We'll try to do it as minimally as possible. We'll always try to do that, but it will impact instruction. It's going to impact transportation. It's going to impact extracurriculars. And so I will mention that why 1.6, because that kind of puts us in a position, go ahead to the next slide, puts us in a position where the next fiscal year we actually hit the board directives of 10% of expenditures. So there's a reason we're trying to hit that number and not go beyond it. So phase one, $750,000, the first reduction, and there no particular order except central office positions totaling approximately $300,000. Will eliminate one central office administrator and two secondary design specialists. This and what's the impact of that? It's going to impact us because these people are important in terms of supporting teachers in the classroom. They actually go in and help support them. If they see something, they help with their instruction and give them advice, give them help where needed. If they're struggling with scores, they also look and try to analyze why and try to provide that support. So there will be an impact. But as I said, I don't know if any of these don't have an impact. Second is our secondary certified staff. We're looking at $243,000 in reductions. This will eliminate 3 full-time teaching positions. This will be done predominantly through retirement, resignations. Okay. We'll ultimately determine that based on who those resignations are and what what those teaching positions are as well. But understand, it will impact classroom size. Dramatically, probably not, but it will impact it. Okay? So I just want to make sure you understand that. Elementary certified staff in the amount of $162,000. This will eliminate 2 support roles. Again, these are typically more experienced teachers that have been in these roles of supporting students that need extra help. Unfortunately, we're not able to stay at this level of staffing, so it'll impact support services and roles that hopefully will preserve as much as we can class sizes in the elementary. Building budgets, we're asking each building budget to reduce 2.5% overall. It's not a huge amount. However, as I've said before, when you're talking about 85% of our budget being personnel, and of that remaining 15%, you really only can probably play with about 5% because the rest of it's, purchase services, or it's utilities, or it's fixed costs. So everybody will feel that pinch a little bit. Summer school. We provide a fairly robust summer school. We'll be reducing that by $20,000, and what that really means is we're going to have to set a standard here that the class has to pay for itself, unless you're talking about a class that's required by law, an extended school year type of thing. That's not what we're talking. We're talking about summer school, just any summer school. So we're going to have to we can't do small classes. We're going to have larger classes to be able to offer it. So if it can't be a zero line item, we can't run it. It has to be self-sustaining. Also, our preschool tuition will increase for our typical students by $308. This will bring in another almost $10,000. Both of these two are not, this one's particularly is not a revenue increase, or it is a revenue increase. It's not a reduction cost. So it's still there. It's available. I understand that it may be a challenge for some, but it does put us in line with those schools around us. We were considerably lower, so we have kind of moved back in line with those other schools near us. So in recapping, you can see that's how we came up with our $750,000, $300,000 in the central office, secondary, elementary, $243,000, $162,000, building budget, summer school, and preschool tuition increase. Again, this phase is about tightening our belts, being really fiscally as tight as we can be, and still provide a quality education. All with trying to limit the amount of impact in the classroom that we could. Other things I want to, just before I move into the second phase, move to the next one. Each year we will evaluate our expenditures and make sure that we're spending appropriately. But I do want you to know that that's not happened. That's happened in the past. And so to a total of $2.7 million in total reduction since 2018. $1.5 million prior to the 2019 operating levy, and $1.2 million since the passage of the 2019 levy. So I only say that just to make sure that everybody understands, we always evaluate our spending, and we'll continue to do so. So moving on to phase 2, this is based on passage or failure of the May 2nd levy. The reductions will have to be implemented. Those are based on current levels of deficit spending. That's how we came up with it. We had to look at where we were spending more than we were taking in and what we have to do to zero that out or neutralize that. We don't have the ability to operate in a deficit, so we can't get there. So this is, if it doesn't pass, we have to do it. So again, this is if the levy does not pass. And I wanted to share this information with you and the community just to be transparent about what it is I'm looking at, what we as a staff have been looking at. And we've had some pretty good arguments. I mean, this is, you're talking about people, you're talking about programs. It's hard, Nobody likes this. I appreciate the professionalism of my staff. That's really rolled their sleeves up. I've pulled them into meetings and made them redo their schedules so we could sit down and go over this and over it and over it. So here's what we're looking at. In phase 2, a reduction of $1.6 million. You're talking about teaching positions that total $882,000. What is that? It's a reduction of as many as 17 certified staff positions or full-time equivalencies. Some of which will be moved into roles. Some of these will be moved into roles that are created through vacancies. Okay, but those FTEs will come off the books. Okay, but there may not be a face with that, but there is an impact. The impact is you can't teach as many sections as you had before. So you've got the same number of students, you're going to increase class sizes. It's going to reduce course offerings because we're going to have to get very picky in terms of what we call a go or no-go, whether a course can be ran. It's going to have a minimum number of students within it. It's going to reduce intervention and student support services. And it's going to reduce enrichment supports. And I say that because one of the reasons that Forest Hills performs so well is because you've got these supports in place. Districts that have supports in place for kids that are struggling, for kids that are accelerated, they achieve at another level, the next levels, And so while it's not required by law, we're in this predicament of, okay, we've got to balance this budget. So that's where those teaching positions will impact the most, okay? And some of those people, those support personnel, will move into classroom roles. Again, many of them by retirements and resignations, but it decreases the total number of teachers that do sections. Pay to participate. This is not a cost reduction per se. It's just that it covers part of the deficit that we do in extracurriculars to the tune of $344,000. It's going to increase athletics pay to participate, and in band, costs would move to $300 at Anderson and at Turpin, and $250 at Nagel Middle School, with the same conditions that are currently in place. If you go out for a third, if a child goes to a third sport or whatever, we don't charge for that one. Mentioned band would also go to $300. Theater, theater has not had one before, so didn't feel like it was appropriate to put them quite into the same category right out of the gate. So that one will be a $175 participation fee, which is similar to what the current band and athletics are currently doing. So that's the pay to participate. Of those, like the theater, $50 would go directly into the program to help the program. Then the other remaining $125 would be used for supplementals for salaries that pay for those related costs. Similarly in the others as well. Transportation to the tune of about a little over $400,000. This will allow us to reduce the number of routes that we currently run, or bus operators that it takes to also run those routes, and the corresponding maintenance and fuel costs. Now, you also know that we're having a heck of a time trying to hire drivers. So even though it's budgeted, because that's what we're currently want to staff at. So with failure, we'll have to reduce this down. What that does is it makes our buses go another tier. It's going to impact starting times. Probably the most would be 30 minutes, but probably 20. Some schools maybe 15. One of the disruptions is going to be half of the elementaries will go at one time, half at another time. Again, this allows those buses to go out, drop kids off, come back, pick up other kids, and go back out again another round. The problem is that we have to fully understand is the impact to our shared staff when you do this. Doesn't mean you can't. It just means we got to make sure that we are completely understand who's sharing roles at a building. You know, if you're moving from one building to another, you know, we got to make sure times sync up. Music, arts, band, we got to make sure those are functioning correctly, especially if it's a secondary teacher going into the elementaries. You got to kind of work that out. So obviously we'll have to do all that work in the event that this fails, but that's a $400,000 reduction that we would have to implement. So the reduction scenarios, get them all. Next page. Again, phase one, $750,000 at the end of the school year. As again, this is just a repeat of the slide earlier. To stay as tight as we can and to keep the operating issue as low as we can and still function and really still bring the high quality education that we're used to having here. Phase two, not as pretty. I'll be honest, it's just not as pretty. There's no way around it. It just you're cutting into the classroom, but that's really all that's left. And so certainly, like I said, not a fun time, and hopefully we can move forward and do what's right for kids and give them the tools that they need for their futures. Thanks.